Ever wondered how a war could be cold? And what could possibly last for over 4 decades without a single direct confrontation between the main belligerents? Today, we're going to unravel the enigma that is the Cold War. A paradoxical period in history, the Cold War wasn't your typical war, nor was it cold. Instead, it was a prolonged state of political and military tension that lasted from 1947 to 1991. This was a time when the world was virtually divided into 2 opposing camps: the Western Bloc, spearheaded by the United States and its allies, and the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union and its allies. These 2 superpowers never confronted each other directly in open warfare, but their ideological and geopolitical rivalry reshaped the global landscape. So, let's delve into the chronology of the Cold War, an intriguing period of history that shaped much of the world we know today. The end of the Second World War didn't bring the expected peace, but rather set the stage for another kind of war. As the dust of battlefields settled, the world's geopolitical landscape was undergoing a seismic shift. The Allies, once united against a common foe, found themselves confronting a new kind of tension, one that threatened to fracture the world into 2 opposing camps. The Potsdam Conference, held in the summer of 1945, was a critical pivot point. Here, the leaders of the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom convened to negotiate the terms of peace. However, beneath the surface of these discussions, a rift was growing. The world was being divided, literally and figuratively. Germany and its capital Berlin were partitioned into zones of occupation, a tangible manifestation of the ideological divide that was beginning to form. On one side of this divide was the United States, a nation basking in the glow of victory and the promise of a prosperous future. The American dream, founded on the principles of capitalism and democracy, was a beacon of hope to many. Yet, across the ocean, another superpower was rising. The Soviet Union, scarred yet defiant after the devastating losses of the war, was championing a different kind of dream. The Soviet ideology was grounded in communism, a system that sought to eliminate social class and distribute wealth equally among the people. These 2 superpowers, each with their own vision of what the world should be, found themselves at odds. And so, as the world watched on, an iron curtain was drawn across Europe. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the world was poised on the precipice of a new era. The United States and the Soviet Union, 2 superpowers with diametrically opposed ideologies, were about to engage in a battle not of bullets and bombs but of ideas and influence. As the dust of World War II settled, the world found itself on the brink of a new kind of conflict. This was a war of nerves, a war of ideologies fought not on the battlefields but through proxies. As the Cold War gained momentum, the world became a chessboard, with the United States and the Soviet Union moving pieces in a global game of power and supremacy. These pieces were nations themselves, drawn into conflicts known as proxy wars, where the superpowers used them to fight their battles indirectly. Let's delve into the Korean War, the first significant armed conflict of the Cold War, which took place from 1950 to 1953. The Korean peninsula, once unified, was split into 2 at the end of World War II, with the North influenced by the Soviet Union and the South by the United States. Both superpowers saw Korea as a strategic point in their ideological battle, and what began as a civil war soon escalated into a full-blown proxy war, involving over 20 countries. When the dust settled, Korea remained divided, a reminder of the Cold War's lasting impact. Next, we moved to the jungles of Vietnam, where the Vietnam War raged from 1955 to 1975. Here, the United States and its allies supported South Vietnam against the Communist North, which was backed by the Soviet Union and China. This war was a brutal and bloody affair, with the US using everything in its arsenal, including controversial chemical weapons. Despite its superior firepower, the US could not secure a victory, and the war ended with the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule, a significant blow to the Western Bloc. The Soviet-Afghan War, fought from 1979 to 1989, saw the tables turned, with the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan to prop up a friendly communist government. The United States, along with its allies, provided support to the Afghan resistance, the Mujahideen. This war became a quagmire for the Soviets, draining their resources and morale, and is often compared to America's experience in Vietnam. In the midst of these proxy wars, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The Soviet Union, in a bid to counter US missile bases in Turkey, placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the US coast. For 13 tense days, the world watched as the two superpowers stared each other down. Thankfully, diplomatic efforts prevailed, and the crisis was resolved without direct military confrontation. These proxy wars and conflicts were part of a larger pattern during the Cold War, where the United States and the Soviet Union sought to extend their influence and ideologies without directly engaging each other in warfare. They were high-stakes gambles, with the world's peace hanging in the balance. While the world held its breath, the superpowers continued their dance of dominance, each seeking to outdo the other. The year 1989 marked the beginning of the end for the Cold War. A period of intense geopolitical and ideological rivalry was slowly unraveling, and key events and figures were at the heart of it. In 1989, the world watched as the Berlin Wall, that colossal symbol of division, was torn down. This towering concrete barrier had separated East and West Berlin since 1961, a haunting reminder of the deep divide between the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. Its fall was more than just the demolition of a physical structure. It was the collapse of an ideology, a clear signal that change was in the air. Yet, the fall of the wall was just the beginning. The Warsaw Pact, a collective defense treaty among 8 communist states of Central and Eastern Europe during the Cold War, was next. Formed in 1955 as a counterweight to NATO, it was the Eastern Bloc's answer to the Western Alliance. However, in 1991, the Warsaw Pact was dissolved. The once powerful alliance crumbled, leaving behind a void that echoed the seismic shifts taking place across the globe. At the epicenter of these changes were key figures: Ronald Reagan, the charismatic American president, and Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union. Reagan's firm stance against the USSR and his demand to tear down this wall played a significant role in pressuring the Eastern Bloc. On the other side, Gorbachev's policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, set the stage for monumental change within the USSR. Yet the biggest shockwave was yet to come. In December 1991, the USSR, the mighty superpower that had stood for over 7 decades, dissolved. 15 independent countries emerged from its ashes, marking the end of the Cold War era. The Cold War had ended not with a bang but with a whimper. The ideological struggle that had held the world in its grip for over 4 decades had finally come to a close, leaving behind a world forever changed by its echoes. The Cold War left an indelible mark on the world, the effects of which are still felt today. This was a period of intense geopolitical rivalry, pitting the ideological might of the West against the East, and it shaped the world we live in more than any other event in the latter half of the 20th century. The most immediate impact was the rise of the United States as the world's sole superpower. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States emerged unchallenged in its economic, military, and cultural influence. The American dream was no longer just an American phenomenon, it was a global aspiration. The world watched as the United States set the pace for technological innovation and economic growth, a trend that continues into the present day. Yet, the end of the Cold War did not bring about an end to global conflict. Quite the contrary. The political and economic transformation of Eastern Europe was a complex and often painful process. The joy of newfound freedom was quickly overshadowed by the harsh realities of transitioning from a centrally planned economy to a market-driven one. The shift led to a period of economic instability and social unrest, paving the way for the rise of new political forces, some of which continue to challenge the democratic ideals of the West. Similarly, the Cold War's legacy echoes in the ongoing conflicts in regions like the Middle East and Korea. These regions were among the most contested terrains during the Cold War, with the superpowers vying for influence and control. The Cold War may have ended, but the divisions it created still persist, fueling conflicts and shaping geopolitics. So the Cold War, a paradox in itself, was a war that shaped the world without a shot fired between the main adversaries. Yet its impact is far from over. The echoes of this silent war reverberate in our world today, shaping our present and influencing our future.